really want a Porsche. Not just any Porsche, a Porsche 911 GT3, in light pink, obviously. I really want to go on vacation. Somewhere like Bora Bora, Fiji. I really want some more clothes. I really just want more. Humans are constantly desiring more. More clothes, food, vacations, friends, fame, success, and ultimately, more pleasure. When the desire for pleasure in our lives becomes greater than the contentment in our lives, we run into a list of difficult habits that are very strong and hard to break. These bad habits are developed through constant stimulation seeking and seeking it in every way imaginable, but can be easily broken through a method called the dopamine detox. Dopamine is a chemical neurotransmitter that creates these tangible feelings and transfers them to our other nerve cells. It is associated with learning, motivation, and pleasure. Activities that can trigger dopamine release are any activity that can give you pleasure. For some, that might be working out, creating art, watching movies. But when one participates in these activities, they feel a rush of dopamine that they want to feel again because they feel good. This sensation can be compared to an experiment we talked about in psychology this year. You may have heard of Ivan Pavlov and his dogs. This experiment was run by dogs, their bell, and some food. The dogs were put in a cage and the bell was rung. After this bell was rung, the dogs would receive their food and would consider it a reward. Over time, the dogs began to salivate because they knew they were expecting this treat or food. Eventually, after hearing that particular sound of the bell, they would start to salivate even when no food was presented. We know dogs are a man's best friend, but it seems they have one particular trait in common. Dogs and humans alike are easy to condition and desire a reward. So far, dopamine sounds like a great chemical messenger, right? So how does dopamine release become dangerous to us? As previously mentioned, humans desire more. Perhaps it is due to the fall in some sin that we had in the beginning, or perhaps it was because we were created to desire holiness in our lives and got that twisted ever since the fall. Either way, we have all desired more at some point in our lives. Dopamine release is not a definition that I can use to explain, but more so with a moment. Imagine a warm summer night. Me and my best friend are driving around in our car, windows down, and the music is blaring. We're singing our favorite songs, and suddenly we feel a euphoric dopamine release that makes us feel good. For other people, this might be something different and unique to them, but this is my personal experience. So because this is not a rare moment, I try to replicate this dopamine rush as often as possible, as other people do, which leads to addiction. So maybe your dopamine release is something as innocent and little as playing music a little too loud in your neighborhood. Or maybe it's not so innocent. In my Human Society and Literature class this year, we read a book called Brave New World. In this book, we are introduced to a society of people who rely only on their own needs and their own pleasure. When things in these characters' lives get difficult, they begin to release these emotions and get off this stress by an option called soma. Soma is what you could compare to any modern day substance that we see in our society. And not only would the characters around this character who's struggling recommend it, they would completely normalize it, which sounds a little too familiar. This book comparison proves that when the desire for more becomes stronger, the morals and opinions in your life start to decrease in the priorities in your life. Sometimes we excuse the rule bending just to get a little bit more dopamine. And the sound of soma is a lot more appealing than the consequences it brings. We live in a society where constant stimulation occurs, and no matter where we are, we will never, ever be bored. Imagine the last game you played on your phone, or maybe watch a friend play. Maybe it's something as silly as a cooking simulator. Whatever the game may be, you're playing it on your phone, and an advertisement pops up for another game. In that advertisement, it shows a trial of another game you may play, and if you lack self-control like I do, you might download that game. And as you play the other one, you realize you forget about the first game all entirely, and the cycle begins to start. I bring up the point of this just to say that we're constantly seeking more entertainment and the next best thing that we can get. Although this is easy to spot in silly advertisements for games, We fail to ignore the bigger picture and the eventual downfall in our daily lives. Everyone hates to admit it, but technology is one of the #1 reasons we have unhealthy dopamine in our nation. As I was doing my research, I stopped worrying about how often I check my phone in a day and started worrying about something we'll call the phantom phone notification. Have you ever had your phone in your back pocket or laying beside you and you feel a buzz? When I feel a buzz, I imagine that my best friend texted me or Harry Styles posted on Instagram. So of course I would check my phone. When I do that, I will see that there's nothing on the home screen at all, meaning that I was making this feeling up entirely, all because I wanted to have that excitement or validation. I brought this up in my interview with Mr. Lee C. Culver, a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and he said that this is one of the more mild forms of obsession that he's seen in our generation. This led our interview into a specific topic covering those born within 1997 to 2013, also those who are known as Generation Z. Lee Culver noted that important pieces of information to keep in mind in this specific generation is that all of us were practically born with a phone in our hands. He mentioned a story about his grandchildren going out to dinner. He was so excited to talk to them, and they were sitting there watching their screens the whole time. Some of us may call this term an iPad kid, but the rest of us know that this is obviously not something you want to see when you go out into a restaurant. Not because it's necessarily wrong, but because it just looks sad. After hearing about this personal story, Culver and I could agree that electronics were, of course, a problem, but the tablet obsession is just the beginning of a downward spiral. Some other toxic ways other than technology that we can get dopamine release are through activities like playing video games, gambling, entering relationships, scrolling social media, abusing substances, and even unhealthy eating habits. I would like to cover another specific section of struggle for all of us in this room that have experienced it. In 2020, a global pandemic went across our entire world. This led to every person being forced to keep up with relationships, friendships, work, and school through a screen. And through this, people were put in isolation and not able to keep up with things in person, which sounds like a cool, virtual, online, futuristic world, but it wasn't exactly the best. A psychology researcher named Philip O'Lowry said that it takes an average 18 to 254 days for people to form a new habit, whether it be good or bad. Considering the average lockdown lasted for 6 months, it would make sense to conclude that many people turn this temporary lifestyle into a lasting habit. These new habits with antisocial behavior and stimulation seeking turn into unhealthy addictions that cannot be broken. Anna Lundmark, whose research focuses on medical addictions, wrote in her book Dopamine Nation that the brain processes pleasure and pain in the same areas of the brain, like two sides of a balance. This means the pleasure we crave from dopamine hits causes us pain when we try quitting and easing up on these things. The pain is obviously not easy and is difficult to combat, but it is worth it to be able to process pleasure in a more natural way. So what is too much dopamine, and how do we know whether it is a good or bad form of it? The answer to that question lies in what our Creator desired for us versus the evil sources of earthly stimulation that have caused us to stumble along the years. Natural forms of dopamine release can be found in simple daily activities like a healthy sleep schedule, healthy eating habits, a good working out schedule, and meditating consistently. These activities will keep a person feeling constantly content rather than desiring more harmful things. Anna Lundmark, the author I previously mentioned, as well as the counselor I interviewed, both mentioned some interesting changes that occur when natural dopamine is being released. The correct amount of stimulation in a group setting will lead to deeper conversations, a better work environment, higher productivity levels, and obviously a more attentive audience. In the individual, this shift creates a higher self-awareness, motivation to complete tasks, overall contentment, and more lust for life. Some may argue that this creates a boring lifestyle, but I would consider this a temporary pause to our ever-changing lives. Our lives are not bound to the hamster wheel of 9 to 5, eat, sleep, breathe. We must partake in a detox of the overwhelming things in life to truly find rest. This rest will provide us with a peace we cannot even begin to fathom, and a pause that the Lord intended for our souls to partake in. When we step away from the unnatural forms of entertainment in our lives, we learn how to live again. We are constantly caught up in our lives and our happiness, but a break from these flashing advertisements and constant entertainment will leave us with time to reflect. This reflection should lead to the realization that because we are so selfish and desire our pleasure, we can also focus on others and their time and their pleasure and show them that they actually matter to us. It is unrealistic for us to throw away every single TV show and podcast, but a dopamine detox can be practically adapted to all of our lives. God intended for us to have a God-shaped hole in our hearts that only He can fill. This God-shaped hole means that a piece remains empty in our lives until we surrender to the Lord and let Him fill our soul. This is why we see unbelievers constantly searching, yet constantly feeling unfulfilled. As Christians, we should know that our recent purchases and our new relationships should not leave us feeling happy and getting the validation we need. It will not add up to any amount of joy the Lord Himself can provide for us. So instead of seeking validation and entertainment from a source that will leave us empty, we should instead meditate on the Lord and what He has in store for us. He fills my life with good things. My youth is renewed like eagles. Psalms 103:5. Thank you.
Good job, Ayla. How are you feeling?
Relieved.
What's the dopamine level right
Probably not as high as it should be.
now? So you're already bored, huh?
Well,
All right. Wonderful job, Ayla. And you did wonderful. And just like you did last night, I just knew you would and everything. So, all right. So first of all, let me start with that number one question. What is in store for Ayla after she graduates from MCA?
so this fall I plan to attend North Texas, and I plan to pursue marketing and business.
Marketing and business. Okay, great. Well, I'm so glad you're going to the University of North Texas because that's where I graduated from. And so, do you know who Mean Joe Green is?
Yes, but I honestly don't know how the whole backstory started, so I don't.
Okay, well, I can't let you go off without knowing it.
Right.
Joe Green was a 6'3", 270-pound tackle for their football team and everything, and so he was really tough and a good player, and he got the nickname Mean Joe because it's now the University of North Texas. It was North Texas University, and they were green, their school colors, so they were known as the Mean Green Team. So Mean Joe just kind of went with him, and just really tough and very nice man, very wonderful man. And then he went later to Pittsburgh Steelers, and I always thought that was a tough, rough, team too. So right, Pittsburgh, yeah. So anyway, so then you'll know a little bit. No one probably knows who he is unless you're in the football world and everything. So anyway, my dad thought that was pretty good. I was going there. So anyway, why marketing?
So I was very set on psychology for a long time, and I kind of just had a realization that that is a very heavy job. So I have recently changed my mind because I think marketing is something that I have a lot of options to do with locations and all that.
Okay. Well, you opened up with wanting a certain Porsche, and so you made a wise decision. Psychology to marketing, psychology. You'd only be able to afford that Volkswagen Bug.
Yeah, I think it's a good decision.
So it's a very good decision. So I would be right there along with you with, I wanted to test drive one. My husband said nope. He would get a ticket before he got out of the parking lot. So anyway, so nice choice and everything. So why did you choose this topic? If you've gone away from psychology and everything, why did you choose this topic to leave as your legacy?
So I was listening to a podcast of a YouTuber I used to watch, Emma Chamberlain. And as I was listening, she started talking about how she quit all of these crazy things like She didn't leave her house. She only ate certain kinds of foods, and she did like an extreme version of a real life dopamine detox. And I was intrigued by that, and it was, I believe last summer that I heard it, and I just started thinking about, could I turn that into a process? Is that something that I struggle with? And there it started.
So, have you tried a detox?
I haven't tried a complete detox just because it's completely, I honestly can't get off of my phone completely just because communications this year. But I have had days where like, okay, I will only be on my phone to like text, no TV, no, I guess, unnatural forms of dopamine.
Okay.
So I've done a partial detox.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, I mean, just in reading your paper and as we've talked about, I just got to reflecting on it. I was like, when you're saying, let's see, put the glasses back on. When you say, let's see, where was it? Other toxic ways we get dopamine release are through the activities like playing video games, gambling, entering relationships, scrolling social media, abusing substances, and unhealthy eating habits. I was so excited because I thought, man, this is good. I don't have anything toxic, because playing a video game, I was so excited in 1972 when Pong came out, this little white square we're going, and now the video games are just beyond. I get wiped out 2 seconds in, I'm out, so I don't do that. Gambling, I'm too cheap. I've got $5, I'm going to keep the $5. Who's going to gamble that? And relationships, I've been in a relationship for 41 years. I don't have to swipe anything, look at anyone, so I'm good. Scrolling social media, I just have a hard time figuring out my phone to answer the phone. And so then abusing substances, I do everything holistic, so I don't have that. Unhealthy eating habits, that one I had to consider. I do like a little bit of biscuits and gravy every now and then, so So I was doing real good. And then we start talking about natural dopamine levels. Okay, so I'm okay. So those things, I do enjoy those things. So is talk about more natural and unnatural. We know the unnatural technology and everything. How can just naturally dopamine levels, activities I do that are naturally, how can that be harmful for me?
I don't think the activity itself can be harmful. Like working out, that's not a harmful thing. That's, a natural form of dopamine that helps you and releases endorphins. But I think that whenever it becomes an obsession and becomes an addiction is whenever it becomes toxic. Because any form of dopamine release really you can technically get addicted to. Like people who, I'm trying to think of like those crazy like power or like bodybuilder guys, like who take a bunch of stuff and are like obsessed with working out to the point where it's like harmful to their bodies. That's just like an example that I can think of. And maybe something like, I guess with eating habits too, like maybe they're like a health freak and they just kind of like can't stop obsessing over it. And whenever it begins to take up all of your time, I think that's whenever it becomes harmful.
Okay. And in the book that you read and everything, the author, she even shares that hers was not technology. Hers was reading romance novels. And so she said, she was trying to always plot out how these romances were going to entwine and get off, the couples are going to get together. And so she decided to take like 4 weeks off from reading romance novels. And so after the 4 weeks, she still was craving reading those books. And she thought, there's more to this route than just reading these novels. So she got to evaluating. Do you remember what she found out was the root of that?
I believe it was in her personal life and her personal relationships that she kind of discovered she was searching for that throughout the the romance novels that she reads.
Right, and then she even traced it further to it was the pop music that she was listening to, because most of the pop music that she listened to was love songs, and so that was kind of her root. So then she just totally went away from listening to those love songs and everything. So in this, she has a lot of stories. Can you share another story that we haven't heard or anything that kind of inspired you from her book?
Yeah, so I remember towards the end it was talking about guilt from dopamine obsessions and addiction. And she had this one lady come in named Lori. And Lori was a very uptight person. She sat up straight, wore business clothes, went to church every Sunday, was very very business and straightforward. And she said, I need 120 milligrams of Lexapro, and my doctor sent me here, and you need to get it for me. There's nothing wrong with me. And for those of you who don't know, Lexapro is for people who are struggling with the either lower or higher dopamine levels, which causes anxiety and depression. And she was like, normally the amount is 10 to 20 milligrams. Why do you need 120? And why is your doctor prescribing you that? So she would not open up to Anna Lundberg, the author, and over time she just started asking her, hey, what's your story? Instead of asking her what's wrong or why are you here, she started saying, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your childhood. And she started opening up about how she went to church every Sunday and that was the only consistent thing in her life. But she realized that she never opened up to the people about things she was struggling with, which was some addictions and substance abuse. And she never had a good family life, never opened up to anybody, didn't really have any friends or fulfilling relationships. And she got to the center of this, that she was finding all of these dopamine rushes and these unnatural forms and these harmful things in her life instead of in the community around her, which I didn't touch on in my paper, but I think community is a big part of feeling fulfilled as well. And then towards the end of that, she said, I didn't like Lori when I first met her, but at the end she said, I really liked her, and I thought it was important that she said, sometimes you just need to ask for somebody's story, which doesn't exactly relate to my thesis, but I think it's a really good thing to consider, like, with salvation and things like that.
So through that story, how would you take what you learned from that story and you said community, okay? How would you take that to North Texas with you to use that in your walk, your journey there, when you meet people and things?
I mean, I think it's really important to dive deeper in any of your friendships and relationships. And I think that just talking to people and, asking them like, hey, tell me about yourself, and start with something like that, and eventually intentionally spend time with them and build a level that they feel secure in talking to me about things, opening up about things. Because when people are known, they actually feel loved, and I think that's important to show.
Okay, very nice, very nice. So let's see if I can hit. Okay, I do have one question here. You talk about the experiment with the dogs, and the food, the bell, and all this stuff. So, and you said that, that humans were kind of conditioned to get a reward, okay? Did God design us to be that way?
I would say yes. I think that that's a good question. I would say that yes, we are, I guess, not trained, but like naturally wanting to do this to get to this. Not in the sense of like, if I do good things, I'll get to heaven, but in the sense of I want to worship God because I feel drawn towards Him, because this is a good thing to worship, if that makes sense.
Oh, I think that's right. Thank you.
Well done, Ayla. So I really like this topic. This is something that maybe we've talked a little bit about in class, some of my classes before that we've been in. But as I'm sitting here and I've been listening to your thesis, I listened to your conversation with Mrs. Shelburne. One of the things, a thought that kind of came to me is, it seems a little bit to me like we're really talking about idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
So would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so how is this, just this dopamine rush and all the things that we do trying to pursue these dopamine rushes, how is this a modern day form of idolatry?
I think when people hear idolatry, they think of worshiping a golden statue. But for us, our statue might be caffeine, or it might be technology, or any of these things. And I think what makes it idolatry is putting that thing as a priority above everything else in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case of wanting dopamine, it would be putting your own feelings and pleasure above everything else.
Yeah, and we culturally we place very high value on our feelings, right? And so, yeah, I think I agree that it's idolatry in that we, anything that we take and we place above God, we place above, the two greatest commandments to love God and love others. And it takes a foothold in our life. It becomes idolatry. And we as humans, we're very good at worshiping idols. Half the time we don't even realize that's what we're doing. And so with that, the other aspect of this is boredom, right? So how would you define boredom?
I mean, I think because we're so overstimulated, anytime we don't have anything going on is probably how we would define boredom. But I guess it's more of just a state of an empty mind.
Okay. Yeah. There's not a whole lot going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Why are we so averse to boredom?
I mean, I guess in this modern day, probably because we feel like culture is so go, go, go. I have to be at this time. I have to be here. I have to go do that. And it's almost like boredom is frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times, not just in social media, but in real life, people are very much feel like they're missing out if they're not doing something. And nobody really appreciates like actually taking a rest and stopping for a second.
We have FOMO.
Yeah, that's
We're
what I was
constantly,
gonna say.
we're constantly afraid of missing out on something, and so we constantly have to be going. And I think that's a big component of it is this fear, right? I don't want to miss out on something. I don't want to miss out on an opportunity to have fun. And then also I think there's fear on the other side of it, especially regarding boredom, where I don't want to be alone with myself, right? Being alone with myself, being alone with my thoughts, that scares me, right? And so I need something to constantly be stimulating me, so that way I'm not alone. And what's interesting about that to me is, biblically, when we look at the Bible, a lot of times when God speaks to people is when they're alone, right? Moses is tending the sheep in the wilderness when God talks to him at the burning bush. Elijah is by himself on a mountaintop when God comes to speak to him with a still small voice. And the reality is I think, we're stimulating ourselves so much that we don't even have the capacity to hear from God because of that. And so you brought up this idea of rest as well. And so God created the earth in 6 days, as Genesis describes. And on the seventh day, he does what? He rests, right? And so why is this, obviously God, he doesn't actually need to rest. And yet he does it as an example for us. Why is this something that's important for us?
I think because of the go-go society that we live in, he knows that we need time to reflect and be self-aware and intentional with our time that we have to ourselves. Because whenever you're in a group of people hanging out, maybe it's not even like you're doing something harmful, you don't really have time to think. And how often do you sit in a group of people and just sit there and talk to God and pray in your head? Probably not that often. And so I think he's showing us that we need to rest so that he can, I guess, help us feel peaceful so that we can be filled up and pour out into others, and also so that he can speak to us, like you said.
Yeah. How do you think we think of rest as a society? Do we think of rest perhaps differently than the way the Bible speaks of this?
Yeah, I think that resting to us is often sleeping. That is what we think, like, oh, we need to rest in the Lord. Okay, Ayla, I got it. I'll go take a nap later. And that's not entirely the concept at all. As I said, like, Jesus is talking about, like, him filling us up and us taking a break from everything around us to focus on him and focus on what's going through our mind and our soul.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think for us, when we think of resting, it either has to do with sleep or just doing something else, right? A lot of times when we think about resting, it's, well, my form of resting is doing this activity. I'm just going to, like, sit down and watch Netflix for 5 hours, right? Now I'm resting. It's like, well, that's not actually resting, right? You're not actually giving your mind a break. You're not giving your mind space, you're just going from one busy area of your life to another thing that just keeps you busy and entertained. So, another thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is you mentioned cell phones, and you kind of sort of you brushed on social media. And so these two things, it's interesting to me because cell phones and social media, these are things that have really only been around for 20 years, maybe, if that. And so it almost feels like we're playing with things very freely that we don't grasp the full gravity of. And so with cell phones and social media, how are those dangerous things for us regarding your topic?
I think it's just because it's another thing we can idolize and put as a priority in our life. And like I was saying about like screen time or how many times I picked up my phone. I don't know if on like all phones, but on iPhones I know they have a screen time thing. And if you check, most teenagers are several hours. I'm sure that's true for kids and adults as well. And so if you're pouring that much time into something, into scrolling or texting or whatever it may be, that's very harmful to your mind, and you're not getting like any of that time to yourself to rest or anything.
So with that, I think that's true. And so this is a pretty radical idea in our modern age. But do you think that it would be better for adolescents to not have cell phones?
It's a tough question because yes, I think that it would be a lot better to not be exposed to things and to not be obsessed with this thing, especially like starting out so young. But also, the other side of me is like, well, technology is so nice. We can, communicate with people, be more safe, but is the safety that we get from, a modern day cell phone actually worth the non-safety from the harmful things it can do to us? I don't know.
And I think that is the question, right? That's the question with a lot of things is we give up all sorts of things in the name of safety. But what we have to stop and consider is what is it that we're actually giving up, in order to be what we think of as more safe. So obviously cell phones are here. It looks like they're here to stay, as well as much of other technology. And those things, that's not to say that those things don't have good uses, right? They do have very good uses. But how does one discipline themselves to use their cell phone and technology wisely?
I think it's important to set up some screen time for yourself, or even like if you're younger, have your parents set up the screen time for you. Because although it's like, oh, I don't have access to it, that's kind of the point, is to not have access to it yourself. Because maybe it's just an hour or 2 hours a day. It sounds like a long time, but it's really not whenever you're stuck scrolling. And I think also, like to younger kids, just about like being exposed to things and becoming addicted to their phones. I think it's also important to put like restraints and boundaries on that.
Mm-hmm. So that would be your advice to parents as they're trying to navigate cell phones and technology with their children is be active, be involved. Don't just give them the keys to the car, but actually, make sure that you're involved with what they're doing, what they're looking at, how much they're using it. Okay.
And I think for like adults, because I know that's kind of targeted towards kids, but I think for adults it would just be same thing, setting a screen limit for yourself. And obviously there's emails and messages to reply to, but you can communicate without scrolling.
Well, because for parents and adults, the behavior needs to be modeled for children.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Thank you, Ayla.
All right, Ayla, well done. Let's see. In your paper you say humans are constantly desiring more. Why do we find it difficult to be content?
I think because of, I know I touched on this, but the God-shaped hole
Okay.
that we have. I think because we're constantly trying to, even as Christians, sometimes I struggle with trying to fill my soul with things that aren't God himself and meditating on his word.
Okay. Yeah, I think God's message is just the opposite, because he says godliness with contentment is great gain, and he tells us that to be content with the things that we have. And I don't know that it ever says that we're supposed to go pursue excitement, day in and day out, and occupy our minds constantly. He also says, "Be still and know that I am God." Let's see. Do you think our only reason for doing things is to gain a reward?
I wouldn't say that's our only reason for doing things, because I do think that a lot of times good people have good morals and have just genuinely want to do good because they desire God. But I also think that, because we live in this sinful world, it's easy to just want to do something for somebody because we get something out of it.
Okay. So are there things that we should do without expecting any reward in return?
Yeah, I think just loving God,
Okay.
loving others, and everything that falls underneath of that.
All right. I like it where you talked about, God created dopamine good, but the fall has corrupted its effect, okay? And that you related, maybe God created dopamine to lead us to spirituality and holiness, okay? So do you think that the effects of dopamine diminish over time?
I think they definitely do.
Okay, and that's what leads us to we need more and more and more of it. Just like, substance abuse.
Yeah, I think the world, the state of it is constantly getting more corrupt, but also the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun, so it's nothing that God isn't used to as people testing out.
All right. You talked about, what is it, Brave New World and Soma?
Yes.
And people, nobody wants to feel pain, everybody wants pleasure. So do you think that Soma could be a metaphor for sin?
I honestly never made that correlation, but I do think it could be related to sin.
Yeah, because they want to avoid all pain, and they want to dull pain, they want to have euphoria all the time. All right. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to move fast here because we're running out of time. You talked about technology, iPhones, tablets, and things like that. You talked about, we're all at home because of the coronavirus, and nobody could interact with each other, and all we had was our devices. Okay. But do you think those devices have actually caused a wedge between people, created a division, or that they brought us together?
I think they definitely have. It's a lot easier for somebody to send a text message than to say that same thing to somebody in person.
Okay. Well, that, and also, America's very divided right now. I think a lot of that is due to social media. Makes it easier.
I do think that, social media, whenever you're kind of behind the screen, it's a lot easier to state your opinion and target people.
Okay, I got one last question. Since we've all, not all of us, many of us have become addicted to our devices because we always want to be entertained. We want our minds to be stimulated. Do you think that could destroy some creativity? When I was growing up, we only had 3 stations on the TV, so you're like, okay, I went through all 3 of them, all there is news, so I better find something else to do. And we came up with all kinds of games. We were creative, finding things to entertain us. So do you think that all of this stimulation through social media, all these devices, kills creativity?
Definitely. Because I think that's not what God intended for us. He is our creator, and so he created us with the intentions to also be creative. And I think it kills that instead of where our ideas come from.
All right. Well, good. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're getting to the close here. So I always like you just to share a little bit. You have just been such a blessing this year to be the senior assistant. I don't even like to say senior assistant. You just took the class and went with it in Great Books 1. And I was like, where have you been all these years, girl? Taught you well. So anyway, what have you learned from your Great Books 1 teaching experience this year? You had a great group. you had a group full of a lot of dopamine, all right, I would say. Okay.
Yeah.
So what have you enjoyed? What have you learned from them?
I feel like I learned from them to be joyful again. I think all of them are such joyful people, and it's okay to not be serious all the time. Guys, am I serious in class usually?
No.
No. Have you guys still learned something? No. I didn't hear anybody saying that. That was crazy.
That was Sawyer. I got it down.
No, but I really do think they taught me that you can learn and you can love Jesus and love others by having fun. And it doesn't have to be all serious, let's take it quick all the time. And yeah, I think I've learned a lot about all of them and all their personalities, and we all work together, so it's great.
Well, you did such a wonderful job. They were just so excited every day. They were ready to push me out the door, you know, and where's Ayla? Where's Ayla? And everything. So I just thank you from them of being such a wonderful mentor and showing them that learning can be fun. You're so soft-spoken. I thought, oh, how is she going to handle this class? And you just really handled them very well. And you had a good time, good friendships, and I think we learned a lot from you. So thank you so very much for making their Great Books One so impactful in their lives and everything. So it is time that we pass the torch to you, and you get to ask Mr. McDuffie and Mr. Nelson a question.
Oh, not you?
Oh, no, you've already asked me enough questions through your life. No,
Wow.
you can ask me one if it's a good question.
Oh, okay. So for you, Mrs. Shelburne, you love books, you love poetry, you love everything like that. What character from any book, not just a great books, do you think I remind you of the most? I'll give you all your questions now. Mr. Nelson, all these are kind of fun questions, so guys, don't worry. Mr. Nelson, what would you say? We had an interesting American history class last year. What would you say? What would you say was the most fun memory you have from that class, or even from the trip? And Mr. McDuffie, yours is kind of a serious question. Would you say that your Clash of Clans obsession is a dopamine addiction? Sorry to out you in front of everybody, but
I'll go first to get it over with. My youngest son introduced me to Clash of Clans about 8 or 9 years ago. And I would see him playing this all the time. And I thought, that's just a stupid game. You saw these little things moving around on there. And you go, come on, Dad, just try it once. And I did try it once, and I got hooked on it. And he got me out, I got it, started playing. And I wouldn't say it's an addiction. I play like once a day for about 15 minutes.
Okay.
And I don't know that it's a dopamine rush because it's such a slow-paced game.
that's fair.
Which is why I like it, because I can't play all the fast-paced games that, so most of you guys play. My reflexes and my brain didn't work that fast. So that's why I like Clash of Clans. It's a really slow pace.
Okay.
And I can set it up and just let it go and don't have to do anything else.
It's true. What do you do? Collect coins? Is that-
Loot.
Loot. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
And I got lots of it.
So my favorite memory regarding American history last year would have to definitely be at Gettysburg. And I feel like Gettysburg was just especially special this past year. It's amazing coming out of New York City, because I hate New York City. Just being there is awful, especially when the responsibility is keeping 40 juniors alive and not losing any of them. And so when you get to Gettysburg, it's this small town out in the middle of Pennsylvania, and I like Pennsylvania. We've had conversations about Pennsylvania before.
Yes.
But that night, just the release of all the stress from New York City, me, Mr. Westfall, Dr. Doak, and Mrs. Gakey, we went and ate at this restaurant called Overworks and had amazing steaks, and then we went to get ice cream at Mr. G's. And I don't think any of us stopped laughing for a good 30 minutes. Like it was hysterical, and we were laughing about nonsense. But that was definitely my favorite moment on the trip.
That's fun.
Hard choice, but I'm gonna go, I love children's literature, and so I'm gonna go with Ferdinand.
Okay.
And Ferdinand, you know, this strong girl that's supposed to be doing all this stuff, and accomplish everything, and you're very strong. You don't think you are sometimes, but you're very strong. But yet you're strong enough to know what you want to do in life and how you should live life. And so you're okay just to sit underneath that tree, take it slow and easy, and just smell the flowers and appreciate what God has given you, and to share that with others. And so that's why I would say Ferdinand.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, Mr. Nelson, will you close?
I will. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for Ayla. I thank you for just putting this topic on her heart. And I thank you for just helping her compose this and present it so eloquently. And I just pray, Lord, that you will continue to be with Ayla and continue to just allow her to be a blessing on people's lives, especially as she goes off to college and in the time after that. And I pray that you will just continue to work in her and grow her and bless everything that she puts her hand to. In Christ's name I pray.